folks, we're talking basketball. In this video, we are chatting about the recent onslaught of 60 and 70 point games throughout the league. Looks like there are some people who are bothered by the lack of defense. I'm going to tell you why I don't have an issue with it. And we're also going to talk about the bizarre Doc Rivers signing with the Bucks and his $40 million contract. Now, before we get started, would appreciate a subscribe and a like. As you know, it does continue to help support the channel, and you know that if you're a returning subscriber, I appreciate your support. If you're new here, we are consistently covering the NFL and the NBA throughout the entire season, and I'm gonna just give you straight heat, as always, with my opinions that seem to always kind of pan out. So let's hop into it and let's talk some regular season basketball. Now, Deadspin came out with this awesome article that I was reading through right after Doc Rivers was essentially planted to be the new head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks. And the title reads, Doc Rivers is the habit that the NBA can't quit. And I couldn't think of anything more perfect, because the first sentence of the article mentions that their coach, Adrian Griffin, was set up to fail from the start. There are some revelations in this article that absolutely push that point home. So the first thing that jumps out to me with the information that's coming out is the fact that Griffin, he's had a bunch of head coaching interviews and never officially got the job. But Giannis, his buy-in and his belief in Griffin was really the thing that caused the front office and the organization to move forward with Griffin in the first place. Yes, that's the level of buy-in that you want from your organization if you're a star on that team. But it seems like, and my issue with it, is that they were undermining Giannis from the very beginning by bringing in Doc Rivers as, I guess, a consultant for the organization first, and then a consultant to Griffin. And so tell me why you would implement a coach for your star player who, even on record after you got fired, said, I love the guy. Why would you undermine your star by essentially having Doc Rivers just waiting to take over that role when the team had a record of 30-13? The organization placed Terry Stotts, who is Damian Lillard's former head coach with the Blazers, as an assistant on the staff. You have him and Griffin getting into it, likely because Stotts is overstepping his boundaries by likely also trying to undermine Griffin. And what that says to me is, do not hire a coach if you are not going to provide resources and support from the very beginning, right? Because it's not good enough to simply appease your star at the expense of your long-term strategy. You need to have a conversation with Giannis from the very beginning and let him know he is not our first choice, but here is how we are going to, number one, make you happy because we value you that much. And number two is, here are the things that we are going to put in place. Yes, we've supported him with a ton of former head coaching assistants, but we have made it very clear that they are not going to overstep, and this is what their role is, and he is the head guy. Why that didn't happen is a huge disappointment, and no surprise that the locker room was riddled with issues from the very beginning. This guy legitimately didn't have a chance to really implement anything. And listen, I'm not gonna sit here and say that Griffin doesn't have any responsibility here. In the article, they point out the fact that he put in this very, very intense offense for some really, really poor guards on the defensive side and expected them to bring that intensity throughout the season. I think that's a mistake. We just had a conversation about the issues with NBA and their defense and what it's been like for the last decade or so, right? About Doc Rivers. He won a championship in 2008. That's great. That NBA is not today's NBA. We know that Doc has significantly underperformed since winning that 2008 title, and he has continued to get a ton of opportunities off of that. Listen, hey, I'm not gonna complain, right? That's a black coach's dream. I mean, at the end of the day, Doc he's an NBA lifer, I get that, but at the same time, his teams consistently are blowing 3-1 leads, and his schemes are just flat out very tired. I mean, look at the transformation of the offense when you look at the Philadelphia 76ers, since Nick Nurse came and revamped it. I mean, you're pretty much working with the same roster, and that team has really taken a major step forward. You know, I find that Doc Rivers kind of now comes off as like almost like a figurehead, right? Like, oh, you know, we are going and we're making the right changes to appease the fan base, to appease you know, the stars on the team. But the proof is in the pudding, baby. It's not going to take them over the hump, right? You probably would take Budenholzer back before, and I would advocate for that, before bringing in Doc Rivers, because we know that there's really not a ton that he's going to add to that situation, with the exception of bring some stability to the organization, right? He signs a $40 million contract, so we know he's going to be there. It seems like the front office, to me, is trying to make up for these subsequent moves at the coaching position that has simply just been, ultimately, I think, a mistake. So, you know, I don't have a ton of hope that there's going to be this massive coaching advantage by bringing him in. And when you have the stars like Giannis and Dame in the league, really what you want is some free-flowing offense. And we haven't really seen Doc implement that in quite a long time. Listen, if you're one of the people who is upset about the quality of defense in the NBA, I'm gonna sit here and tell you that you're overreacting. The league has been like this basically since the 2000s. I went back and I watched Kobe's 81-point game, and I wanted to compare it with the defense that I saw that played against Luka during his 73-point game, as well as Joel Embiid's 70-point game. I went back and I looked at the parallels between it, because I understand this tired narrative of, oh, the defense back then was so much more physical and they were double and tripling, quadrupling players every day. It's so tired, it's so annoying. But I went back and there isn't a ton that bothers me about this new phenomenon we're seeing in the NBA of these high scoring games. I'm not gonna sit here and get all worked up about the quality of these regular season games, because we know that there's not a ton of interest from casual fans anyway. The only problem that I have when I go back and I look at Luka playing against the Hawks was that they were so damn indifferent. They didn't care. Like, they were so meh. The only thing that really kind of upset me, for lack of a better term, was that they just kind of looked around at each other and were like, oh no, this is happening to me. No, you guys can absolutely pick up your level of defense and your intensity. Listen, I don't know why they comfortably really sat back and just let him do whatever he wanted. There was a ton of just walking on the court, light contests. I mean, those are the things where, to me, don't look around for other people on the court to help you when it seems like the level of defense on the floor was consistent at all 5 positions. Why they weren't sending double teams, why they weren't trying to force or deny the ball from him throughout the game, I obviously am not going to understand that. But when I compared it back to the Kobe games, my thoughts were, it wasn't like there was a ton of intensity by the Raptors in that game. I expected, honestly, to go back and think, oh wow, they're gonna be sending some of their best defenders out, they're gonna be trapping, they're gonna be doing all these things to try to get the ball out of Kobe's hands. That did not happen. And that's why I have an issue with not saying that there's an epidemic with defense in the NBA. I don't think that that's what's happening here. What's happening is that you have a bunch of dudes who just simply don't care, who simply are just walking around like, I don't know. Like, that's the only thing that is a turnoff to me about it. I just wonder, do you care that you're getting embarrassed? Or does the regular season just breed this level of indifference? So those are things I want you to think about going into the rest of the season. We know none of this stuff really matters until the playoffs anyway. And so if he's got some high-level coaches, right, going up against Nick Nurse, I mean, we'll see, right? We will get to see what that looks like against Eric Spoelstra. That stuff will reveal itself sooner rather than later in the playoffs. And so we're just going to stay tuned. I will see you next time.